screen. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, we don't have. Where's our video?
Can you see us there?
There we go.
Hi.
Hello.
Mr. Hochstein, is it, or is it Hochstein?
Anything works, but Hochstein, I say, but depends what country you're in.
Yeah. Well.
Hochstein's good.
Thank you.
Well, I'm Julia Donahoe. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah,
Nice to meet you too.
I'm Hannah McCalebs, and
Hi.
in the back taking notes is.
Hi, I'm Alex Price.
Hi.
I'm note taking.
Yeah, we're graphic design students at VCU, and we're doing a project right now where we're studying the effect of magazines as they're transitioning to the internet and how online media as well as new technologies has affected that design. And sort of, we really wanted to speak to you as someone who had worked at Time magazine from 1994 through 2009, which I feel was a very important period when it comes to internet transition, and getting your view on that.
Sure.
So, first of all, general questions. Working at Time magazine as design director, what did that entail, your responsibilities?
Well, it was kind of strange, and it still is a little strange there, in that they've kept the digital stuff, not so much the tablet development, but the website was always very separated from the print magazine, which I think was unfortunate. But it's just that's a divide that exists in a lot of places, and the smart ones are figuring out how to integrate everything, because it's absolutely critical too. And I think they may be doing a little bit more now since I've been gone, but they really kept the print side very segregated from the website. When the tablet hit, that was a whole different story, because the tablet design came out of the print art department. So the big challenge there is on the back end, tech side, creating workflows that enabled material to go from print to tablet to the website as well. So that you had, and then also mobile. So all four platforms were, they had to design a system to get material, as seamlessly as possible onto all four. But from what I've seen, just in general with tablets, they haven't been super duper successful in terms of legacy media magazines, having people actually get tablet subscriptions. But they spend a tremendous amount of time and effort and money converting the print products to tablet products. It may be down the line that that's justified, but for the time being, it's a kind of black hole financially. So but they don't have any choice; they have to do it. So and also there used to be guidelines. They were set up, I think, by ASME, which is the American Society of Magazine Editors, where when a magazine like Time, if they had a tablet product, it had to be word for word what was in the print product. That is, I think, no longer true. They've relaxed those kind of rules because it absolutely made no sense.
So there was a heavy, the print magazine had definitely the dominance in there. There was definitely a hierarchy that put the print magazine first.
Yeah. Now Time Inc. Recently, last year, was spun off by Time Warner. So Time Inc., which publishes Time and Sports Illustrated, In Style, People, with a lot of big titles, is now a freestanding company. So they're the digital side of the development is where they're going as a company, and they've made a lot of hires. They've laid off a lot of people on the print side. What they're trying to do is reduce the costs on the print side of things, because print is it's not a dying medium. It's just that from an investment point of view, it's flat. It's a slowly declining medium. But the problem for, say, a big company like Time Inc. is that their revenues still come from print, but they're really starting to decline year over year. Advertising and circulation. I think the last quarter of last year, they were each down like 8% or something. So the trend is starting to happen where, they were in a bind for a while because the world was going digital, but they were still making all their money from print. Now things have kind of turned, and they're starting the digital revenue, I think, toward the end of last year started to match the print revenue, and that means that they're turning a corner. But the question is, the digital revenue, they're competing in spaces that are against places like BuzzFeed and places that are natively digital. So a company like Time has a real challenge because they're trying to convert old products into new products rather than invent new products in the space that exists, the digital space, the mobile space.
So as design director, you sort of said that there was a very large separation between this online presence and your physical presence with the magazine. What system of employees did you have working under you? Were you involved at all with the online people who worked online as a design director, or
practically zero? I think there may be more now. You can talk to the guy who took over after I left, named D.W. Pine, to see how involved he is with the website. He's a nice guy, and I'm sure he'd be willing to talk to you. But as I said earlier, when I was there, they just really kept us away. It was tended to be run more by programmers and developers, and not. You guys are graphic design students, so you're probably more interested in that end of it. But the limitations that existed in web design, and even just a few years ago, really kept you from having a product that reflected the design ethos or sophistication of the print product. So I think that's changed to a degree, but still there's many limitations in web design because you have to design for the sort of lowest common denominator in terms of fonts, in terms of the ability, the kind of computer a person's looking at it on, the size of the screen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the adaptability, has changed. That this is, what's the word? The word that's used? Responsive design, where it definitely will. There's more flexibility on the back end of things on the user end, so that they can create web designs that are, reflect some kind of design sophistication. But in general, at the beginning of things, or even, like up to the time I left, the websites are more kind of a structure. They're kind of a receptacle to put content in, but they're very fixed and locked. There wasn't a lot of flexibility. Whereas in print design, you could constantly change everything. So, it was more, to me, it was more fun. But, things have changed a little. There's some changes in website design that some publications are doing, New York Magazine for one, where they're looking a little bit more like magazines, some of the story presentations. I saw one story, I can't remember what it was on, in New York, and I actually sent a note to Adam Moss, who's the editor of New York, and said, there's something going on here. And he said, well, you noticed that, we've been working on something to use photography better and to make things read more like a narrative, like a magazine story. And you're starting to see a little bit more of that in web design, I think. There's been real changes in web design. The pages are more simple, and there's much more tolerance for scrolling. So instead of having to jump from page to page, they figured out that because of the way people use devices, that scrolling is not a big issue. So you can actually do a long story with pictures in it on a web page that before you just wouldn't even consider.
Yeah. One thing I remembered you talking about on your website, you said that all good work is rooted in concept, clarity, and a general human experience. Do you think that's something that has been lost in this online presence because of, it's less hands-on work, that there's less of a, like you have to, work for the lowest common denominator now, or?
I mean, I'm going to give you an answer that makes me sound like an old fart, but, which maybe I am. But no, I've talked to a lot of people in print. I was at a party over the holidays with a guy who used to work as a designer for one of the timing titles. Then he and another guy formed a company, and they were doing web design and stuff. And I said, "What are you up to?" And he said, "I'm going to barber school." And I went, "Why are you going to barber school?" And he said, it wasn't fun anymore, because he said, "But just what you're getting at, there is a joy in when you're designing something for print where the content, the creation of the content, seemed to be a bigger part of the total effort of what you were doing. In web design, it's more the vehicle is more the expression of the content rather than the individual elements within the vehicle. In other words, say the thing. One time I took a picture of my iPad with the cover closed, and then I opened it up, and it was a cover of Vanity Fair, and that cover in print was so much more important to the magazine than the same cover on an iPad, because you're already there, you're consuming the product, so the value and importance of that cover is not the same, because you're already going into their environment. You're launching the app. You don't have to be sold on it necessarily. So the purpose of, say, something like a magazine cover is very different now. I think it's to actually serve as a kind of advertisement for the magazine. And you hope to do images that say maybe will go viral or people will pick up on or just look at because they're generally cool or whatever. And then they get passed around in social media, and that's what the purpose of the cover is, more than selling a product on a newsstand, for instance, because the newsstand model is largely broken in print. I mean, say in a magazine like Time Magazine, a good newsstand sale now is probably less than a third of when I was there, and that was only 5 years ago. And between the time I started and left, it went down by 25% as well. So they just don't sell print copies on the newsstand. So, and the problem with that financially is that that's where their highest margin is. Subscriptions, they're giving away the magazines at a very low price in order to get people to essentially give them money ahead of time so that the company can take that money and do something with it. It's great to have a product that people pay for ahead of time, but you have to give that to them at a lower price. So the content, I think, has changed. The idea of, and this guy who's now studying to be a barber, he said, you know what I miss? And I don't know if this is too, like, if you've had the chance to do this kind of thing as students yet, but what he missed was the interaction with, say you're working on a story and you have a problem to solve, and you think, okay, how are we going to do this? Are we going to do this with photography? Are we going to do this with illustration? Then you think, okay, we're going to do this with illustration. Then you call up the illustrator and you talk it through, and the person sends sketches, and it's a conversation, and you get to know the person through this. And he said nowadays, like, his experience was doing websites, you just get a bunch of content handed to you, and your job is just to basically upload it, and, they're assets. It's not really content anymore. So sometimes you see something great online, but generally it's something that's been done in another medium, like print, and then it gets disseminated online, but it's not necessarily created to be a great image online. So that's one area. Photography is another one where great, say, photojournalism became sort of devalued, I would say. The print magazines no longer either had the resources or got the return to fund great photojournalism. It's expensive to support people in the field and, pay them the fees, their agencies and stuff. So, you see a lot of stock photography on the internet, just the imagery is as important.
Yeah.
As far as specific format of magazines go, we were wondering, would you be able to speak to how you've seen the specific formatting of magazines in print shift since you began, like, for instance, like the columns, the spreads?
To a degree. I mean, I think, have you guys kept up with the New York Times Sunday magazine? This past issue, and if you haven't gotten it, you should run out and see if you can get it, because they just launched there was a very, very anticipated redesign of the Sunday Times magazine. And I think, I don't know, 6 million people or something see that magazine. It was very waited for, scrutinized, and it's being talked about. And they did a very good job. And what's interesting to me is the response to it. Half the people thought this was a great celebration of print, and the other half said, this is a magazine that has reformatted itself for digital readers. So, and I found that interesting because I didn't have, to me it just looked like a nice print redesign that respected their traditions. It's quiet, it's elegant, it's, it doesn't really, to me, the design of it is, it doesn't seem like, oh, we're doing this because now we're being influenced by web design. I don't see that at all. So in answer to your question, I think most print design still kind of treats itself like print. The only difference that I've seen is magazines have a terrible habit of just repeating what's worked in the past. So say you're redesigning a magazine and you go, okay, well here's how magazines generally are structured. There's the little itsy bitsy stuff, the appetizers, the tidbits at the front, and then you usually have a well with stories in it, and then at the end you might have something that's a little bit more like, I don't know, lighter or culture, or broken down again into smaller units, but not as like itsy bitsy fast moving as the stuff in the front. And to me, I was recently working on a redesign project, and the editor wanted a lot of stuff, all those little itsy bitsy things in the front, and I said to him, why don't you forget that stuff? It's useless when people can get all this stuff online. Anything that you see in print that you can and it happens all the time, I'm sure you experience it too. You see something in print, you go, I know that already. I've seen it, So anything that you can put in print that's already been online, you don't want to. So to me, it's an opportunity for magazines, say, to go to more, and the Times is doing this a little bit in this redesign, a little bit more long-form journalism and a return to what makes print good, which is really rich visuals and really immersive long-form reading, because the internet is there for, and your mobile is there for that stuff. Like, you'll never design a mobile website that's beautiful looking. Mobile was designed to be as super efficient as possible, to get as much information as quickly as possible onto a little screen, and to give people a quick menu that they can read. So that's very different than print. To me, print is like, I call it like taking a bath, on Sunday or something. You want something you want to read while you're relaxing, while you have time, and that's just those are two very different things. So to try and make a print magazine designed like something that it's online, I've always thought it was kind of the wrong way to go. But a lot of people, there was a big trend to try and do that. I think now there's a slow return to appreciating print, not only in magazines but also in books. Everybody was ordering their books for their Kindles or their iPads, and reading them online. But my wife's a perfect example. She just never. I said, get a Kindle, and she tried it. She hated it, and she spends a lot of time with her laptop, looking at websites and her Facebook page and reading interesting stuff. But when she wants to read a book, she reads it in print. It's not a book to her unless it's in print. So I think what's going to happen is there's going to be sort of fragmentation of all the different media, and the same way that like years ago when television first came out, and they said, well, that's the death of radio. Well, radio's not dead. It's just doing something different. And then the same thing happened when the internet came out. They said that's the death of print. Print's not going to die, but I think it's going to move into different niches, and they'll find their level. And you see a lot of, I don't know how much money they make, but really beautiful luxury magazines in say esoteric areas like food. Where you see like Lucky Peach. I don't know if you've ever heard of Lucky Peach or seen it, but it's a magazine put out. There's a restaurant in New York called Momofuku, and the chef David Chang is a big celebrity chef, and they put out a magazine called Lucky Peach, and it's a food magazine, and it costs like, I don't know, $30 an issue, and it comes out maybe quarterly. And I see you look back, your face back there. You're going like $30 an issue. But that's kind of that's one area where print's going, because you have to find the right audience, and then the economics of printing and distributing, it's too slow for fast-moving information, and it's too expensive. the mail, all the costs are going up and all the revenues are going down. So they have to. So what do? Instead of making it cheaper and cheaper, which is what a lot of publishers have tried to do, you can only make it so cheap looking before it looks like a flyer, a free giveaway. So, and I noticed in this Times redesign, they said we're improving our paper stock. So they're admitting that there's a value to print, and they're trying to find that value and see where it is. And I think that's what the smart people in print are doing. And every publication serves a different purpose that's multi-platform, I think. And there's web native or tablet native publications, but I don't know of any that are that successful monetarily. Like the Huffington Post, for instance, tried to do one, and it went belly up. They had to disband it because they found that they couldn't make people pay for it. And that's, of course, the other big, the elephant in the room is getting people to pay for digital content. And they're used to paying for print content, but now they're not anymore, but they're not willing to replace that spending on digital content. So it's kind of a big mess for people that are in the publishing industry. So, but if I'm wandering away too much from design, let me know, because I know you're design students. But one thing, if there's anything I can share with you, aside from the specifics of this, it's that there is absolutely think about the whole thing as an industry and all this other stuff, and not just the design. Because the last thing you want to do when you get into the working world is be ghettoized as just a design person. The more you think broadly, the better off you'll be. And that means thinking about the whole thing as a product, thinking about the editorial, really involving yourself in the editorial process. That's when I started out, I wasn't a design student, I was a journalism student. Mm-hmm. And I found myself a little frustrated by the process of journalistic reporting. And I actually had a class when I was in school like you, where I had to take a design course. And there was one professor in there, and I went from being like, that, and all of a sudden I was like waving my hand, and it was about design. It like opened my eyes that much. One teacher, one class. But my background was really in wanting to be writer and editor. So for me, like, to combine those two things was great. And the more you can think about the content that you're actually designing and not necessarily the style of it, I think the better it'll serve you.
I mean, I think there's definitely no need for there to be a large separation between those things. Like, design is obviously optimization of content. It's not just a visual aspect. Otherwise, it would be fine art, just purely. We'd be painting. We wouldn't be dealing with product.
Working designers don't really see it that way. They really think of it in terms of the look. Yeah. And it's great it's important, and you want it to be beautiful, or depending on the magazine, you want it to be beautiful, or super sort of organized and structured and intelligent looking, but yeah, there's really it's important to keep that in mind. So, but in terms of when you were asking about grid structures or designing, I think print design still exists in its own, pretty much in its own bubble. Any attempt to sort of have it be influenced by digital design, I think, have just wandered off the rails. That said, come back to this New York Times Magazine thing. I can't understand why people have said it's a print redesign for a digital reader. Maybe I should look at it again, but to me, it just looks like an editor with new ideas, very smart guy who worked at the Texas Monthly, was hired last year to be the editor of the Times Magazine. And he bided his time, he waited for a while, they launched a redesign, they brought in really good people. And it looks like just a new thought for the magazine from a smart editor, and executed extremely well by a smart designer. And getting back to content, the first thing I noticed when the design director there, her name is Gail Bichler, Bichler, and the first thing I noticed when the new editor got there was how much the covers were changing. And that's something that absolutely is so important, whatever ideas you have as a designer and things you want to do, especially with content, if you don't have an editor that you work with or a publisher that lets you do them, they just end up in the drawer. So it's really great when you can develop a relationship with an editor where the editor kind of trusts you to be an asset, to bring your thoughts and your ideas to the execution of things, and you could see it like that, like you could see the change was so drastic, and for the better, because you could see somebody really stretching that hadn't had a chance to do it before a new editor came in and said, go for it. So
one of the things we had noticed, like speaking of redesigns, was sort of like the experimental nature of magazines. Like you said, they're moving forward towards these heavier publications that were more expensive but like better made. Like there's like an emphasis on quality. That there's one thing we had noticed with like smaller online publications that were distributed through things like iBooks, like Apple's book version of the iTunes store. That there are these small interactive publications that seem to place a very heavy emphasis on experimental design. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on whether print has any more room left for truly experimental, edge-pushing design, or whether that's what the web presence is going to be from now on.
Yeah, I think it does. Again, I think it depends on the size of the publication, but also if you look at a publication like Bloomberg Business Week, I don't know if you look at that, but Business Week was a very straightforward publication, and when they did a redesign in 2000 and when was it? I guess 10, and I actually helped them find their new creative director, a guy named Richard Turley, who had worked at The Guardian in London. And I had seen his work. There's this thing called the Society of Publication Design. I don't know if you're members or ever go to their website or anything, but it's a very cool organization of design, of magazines, mainly magazine designers in New York. And they have a big, fancy black tie gala every year, and they give awards. It's like the Academy Awards for magazine design. And if someone has a piece in the show or something, or they're up for an award, they do. Like this guy came from England and happened to be sitting at my table, and a couple years later got a PDF of his work, and his work is totally out there, like you would think like way too crazy for a mainstream magazine, but they had an editor that was hired there who I used to work with at the time named Josh Turangle. And Josh is like sort of a risk taker kind of guy, and he's smart and funny, and he put this guy in, and they hired him, and he became like the biggest thing because he was doing covers and on the inside too, like design that was normally not what you consider, in answer to your question, like sort of straightforward or non-experimental. It was very out there, and it had a very strict grid underneath, but his whole idea was about like taking something structured, and then the content was like graffiti. It was like just thrown on there. So it looked kind of random, but there was actual structure underneath it, and it's not something anyone could ever copy because it was so much from this guy's brain, although he's since moved on. He works for MTV now, and they're still doing a pretty similar approach, and the guy who was working for him is still doing pretty interesting out there covers, but they changed the whole marketplace. Now Bloomberg's owned by Bloomberg, and they're such a rich company that magazine doesn't have a lot of pressure on it to make a lot of money. Yeah. So they can afford to be experimental. The more you need, there's definitely a balance factor there where you don't want to alienate, like this Times redesign. They didn't want to alienate, they didn't want to step on their history. So it's really important to sort of, depends on the publication, but the newer the publication, or if they're native to either tablet design or web design, you can be as crazy as you want, I think. So it's all situational. But there is room in print for that too, for sure. There's lots of amazing experimental stuff out there, and a lot of times you just don't see it. Have you ever studied a guy named David Carson?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, we heard of him. We've definitely
David Carson was, completely like wacko.
Yeah.
In terms of his design, he once said an entire story in like Zap Dingbats.
Yeah. Because it was nonsense, and so it should look like nonsense.
So he just, but it was great that, because even though you might not, as a designer, I might not do that, but you have to. He inspired a lot of people to sort of look at design differently. And there was also a piece. It was in Wired sometime in the last 6 months. It was their design issue, and it was written by Scott Dadich, who was the creative director at Wired. Then he went to work for Condé Nast and did their digital development, then was rehired by Wired as their editor. So he went from being the creative director, to the editor of the publication. And at the beginning of this piece, he basically says that for any design to be great, it has to risk being ugly. It has to risk being different, because otherwise you're just kind of repeating things over and over again. Mm-hmm. But there's, really two schools on that. Like my own approach is I'm very sort of simple and classical, and the more transparent the design, in a way, the better it is, because I'm getting back to the C word, content. I'm much more interested in the design as a vehicle for making for presenting interesting concept, narrative, story. So, there's room for everything, and it's like going to a restaurant. You want to eat like a steak and potatoes, or do you want to eat some crazy experimental, whatever they call it, molecular gastronomy kind of food, where it just depends. There's really room for everything. It depends on what your own strengths and weaknesses are, tastes, But no, there's no rules there, I don't think.
I wanted to go back to what you said earlier about how print is becoming a lot more expensive. Do you think there are any specific reasons why digital is a lot less expensive? For instance, does it have to do with the hiring? Do they outsource a lot?
A little bit of everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, first of all, it doesn't cost anything really to disseminate it, because all you have to do is produce it and upload it to a website. Mm-hmm. So or if it's an app, you upload it and somebody purchases the app or downloads the app. So that whole chain of things that have gotten more expensive, the postal cost, printing costs, all that stuff is just gone. Trucks, distributors, mm-hmm. There's this whole group of things has been eliminated from the process. So, and that's one of the reasons the publishing industry got so interested in digital, was because it was like, hey, we can get our product out there and still charge people, but we can cut out all these costs, so maybe we can keep making money. But the problem is that on those platforms, people don't expect to pay. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't go to that many paid websites. I do a few, but basically, if somebody wants my money, I just go somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and you can speak to this better than I can generationally. In fact, my friend DW, who's now the design director of Time, years ago he wanted to push a story called "Everything is Free." We live in a world now where you just expect it to be free. You don't expect to pay for it. And you see it in the music industry. Mm-hmm. There's I can't remember who I was. Oh, there was a guy on Bill Maher's show, Real Time, who's like a musician, and he said $7 billion has gone out of the music industry, and that was money that used to get paid to writers. And he had a song that was on Spotify. It had 5 million downloads on Spotify or something, and he got paid $12,000. So the person can't make money. So in terms of your question, there are a lot of costs associated with print that to keep going at scale is going to be very hard. I think for the big publications, smaller ones not as much.
So how have things been since you left Time? Working independently is a lot of consultation work, or?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. I do. I did some consulting. I consulted for Bloomberg before and helped them find a new design director. Did the same thing in Newsweek before Newsweek still publishes. Somebody bought it, but this was the last of the original Newsweek.
Yeah.
When Tina Brown was the editor, I consulted there, and then just I did a project for AARP. So they're it's sort of whatever comes over the transom is what I do, and then just specific design projects. Stuff just tends to come along, through one form or another. And I design books for Time Inc. still. They have a kind of thriving book publishing division, and I design titles for them. So there's sort of no rhyme or reason to it. But what I found in my own case is I haven't really pushed doing digital design because it gets back to that question. The things that got me into print design they're not as apparent to me as forms of like gratification in digital design. I mean, I can understand why there's a certain skill and pleasure in doing a good website, but then kind of once you've done it, you've done it. Whereas, say in the magazine business, each issue has a life of its own, and you kind of go like, that's a great issue, or that one was terrible, or whatever. But there was more like up and down, and it just seemed like more issue to issue life in it. Where years ago, Marshall McLuhan, I made this famous phrase that the medium is the message, and I think it's never truer than today. Like the medium of the internet it's the way you get it is more important a lot of times than what's on it. So and in some ways, good information has been devalued because of, say like, I don't know, a guy who used to work with us at Time. He's a tremendous illustrator named Adele Rodriguez, and he did a piece that kind of got a lot of criticism. It was about how women are treated in Silicon Valley. I don't know, did you happen to hear anything about this?
Not in relation to Silicon Valley, no.
It was a kind of innocent-looking cover, but people just went crazy. They were holding it up on the Today Show saying, this is horrible, this, that.
Wow.
So it does show you the power of, like, it was an image created not solely for print, but mainly it was like a print in one image can really still have a lot of power. So
yeah, we've noticed a lot with VCU's sort of been going through this. The graphic design program especially has been going through this revitalization of analog processes as well as like our relation to print. Like our typography teacher, for example, has us printing out our stuff like in every step, just sort of say like, this is what you're making this for, so you need to see it in this context.
That is very good advice.
I mean, it sucks on the wallet, but it's definitely helped.
No, I mean, I have a really good Xerox printer that I use in my home. I work out of my home, but doesn't make my wife too happy that there's this big Xerox machine. But when I work on a project, like if it's print, you want to see it in print.
Yeah.
You want the client to see it in print. I mean, I was just doing some business cards for a book agent here in New York, and I sent the PDFs off to his assistant. But I said, you know what? I've got them printed and trimmed. Letterhead. Just the same kind of project you might do in school. Business card, letterhead. Mailing labels, but I said, you can't really judge it online because it should be judged in the medium that it's going to end up in. So if you're doing a website, judge it on a screen. But a lot of the subtleties of print design can't exist in web design, and I don't know if you study much about the typography of web design, but there's a whole new generation of people designing typefaces specifically for use online because the needs are so different.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get your opinion on.
Of feedback.
Oh, okay.
There's feedback. I'll just talk through it. I just wanted to get your opinion. Our professors have a lot of opinions on this as well, but in your opinion, what do you think entails good design?
Wow.
That's not easy.
Oh boy. One time I was at this isn't the answer, but it's a key to the answer.
Okay.
Which is that the Stanford University used to have this, they still may do it, it's called the Stanford Publishing Course. And they invite people to go out there and, they have some people in the business that teach, and they have people that work in the publishing business, maybe in smaller jobs. And it's like a 10-day or 2-week publishing course during the summer out there. And one time there was this guy, and he said, this big auditorium full of people, like 500 people. And he said, what's the definition of a successful strategy? And I thought of the answer, but someone else raised their hand and said it before I did, and it's the one that works. You know, so it's actually good when you ask what good design is. It, in a certain way, it's the one that works. There's no complete definitive answer about what good design is, I think, but it's design that accomplishes the objective of whatever it is it's trying to accomplish. So I know that's a kind of metaphysical kind of answer and not a direct answer. I mean, in other words, my definition might be different than yours. You know, my definition would be good design is design that it simultaneously is clear and clean and precise and aesthetically interesting, where all the decisions that are made along the way make sense, and the reader might not even know why those decisions are made, or the consumer might not know why they're made, but the designer knows exactly why they're made and it considered them. So that's one aspect of it, and the other aspect of it is, does it provoke does it provoke your mind? Does it provoke your heart? Does it move you emotionally? Does it explain something well? In other words, it's like both sides of your brain. I think good design is something that satisfies both sides of your brain. The desire for organization and for explanation and for just sort of objectivity on the one side, and on the other side is the side for creativity. And it's a balance. Good design is something that finds. So here's my answer. Good design is the thing that strikes the right balance between objectivity and creativity. I think that's what good design is.
And on that note, we thank you so much for talking to us. Absolutely,
You're welcome. I hope it was helpful.
Yeah,
beyond helpful, honestly. Seriously, thank you so much for taking time to speak to us.
Sure. And if you're interested in more stuff, like just incidentally, I mentioned a guy's name who's worked. He left time and he worked through. He had his own app development company, and now he left that world because that world changed. Every time I'd see him, I'd say, "How's it going?" He said, "It changes every 5 minutes." And people start being able to produce their own apps. Now he's like the creative director and vice president of a mobile company, and he's a really smart guy. So if you're interested, I can give you his name, and he loves to talk.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
This is great.
Because he could give you a sort of I've been through all these different phases look at things that might be helpful to you.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to speak to him if you can. This has been a great.
I'll give you his name now if you want to approach him. His name is Joe, and the last name is Zeff, C-E-F-F.
Z-E-F-F.
C-E-F-F, yeah.
Gotcha.
People say, "Oh, Joseph," and they thought it was some French guy. Joseph. But actually his name, and he's a very nice guy, and he loves to talk about this stuff, and he has really moved through all the different phases of it, from information graphics, newspaper design, then app development, and now he's on the mobile because of the world changed in such a way that basically people are consuming most of their stuff on their phones. That's just the world we live in. So there will be niches, just to end up niches for these other things. But the big move now is the big play is mobile. That's where it's all at. So So anyway, that's another name. If you want to, you can Google him, or if you want to email me, I can give you an email contact.
Okay. Well, again, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Monday.
Okay, nice to talk to you. Take care.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, have a good day. Goodbye.
Guys. What if you can still see us?
I really hope. No.
Guys, that was incredible. Oh wait, we're still recording.
No, it's we'll pause
I don't know
it.
how to stop it.
Yeah, pause it. Wow. Okay.
Oh my god!
Wait,
That's
can you
so
go
crazy.
to his
Oh wait, we're still